All right, welcome everybody. It's so wonderful to see so many familiar faces and names popping up and some new names as well. We're really glad to see you all here. My name is Gabby Connicker and I am the president and co-founder of Wishes for Elliot. And I think most people know, but if you don't know, we founded Deep Connections about a year and a half ago and have 27 patient advocacy group partners that work with us to bring webinars to DEE families. And I know DEE is a newer term that we're all still getting used to, developmental and epileptic encephalopathies. And we know that these issues spread much wider, that we're talking about today, stretch much wider than the DEE community. But, we're starting on this series to talk about how to be prepared for everything in the future, having a special needs child, a medically fragile child. So this first session about being prepared, we're talking about the journey towards a secure future for your child. And really, this is kind of an overview of, of kind of what we need to be starting to think about as parents and caregivers of children who have significant needs. And I'm really excited, we're partnering with the Angelman Syndrome Foundation on this because they have been doing some incredible leadership and work with their foundation that has an adult task force that is actually led by Robin, who is a rare mom to Paige and chair of the Angelman Syndrome Foundation Adult Task Force. And Amanda Moore, who is also a rare mom to Jackson and CEO of the Angelman Syndrome Foundation. And then Anne Ehlert, who is a certified financial planner and comes with many years of success in that role, but also is the president and co-founder of Protected Tomorrows, which really works from a personal place to help families like ours prepare, because she's been through it with her sister. So that being said, let's do this, get everyone on the screen. So I think we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna start with Robin talking a little bit about her experience, and then kind of roll into Marianne talking about her areas of expertise and experiences. And then Amanda is going to tell us a bit about her experience as a mom as well. She and I both have kids who are a bit younger, and the list that they've put together and are working towards to help us think about all the tasks we need to take care of as time goes on. And as I was just saying before to everybody here, this is very informal, so you'll probably hear us popping in and chiming in and commenting as each other talk. And if you have questions that are coming up for you as we're talking, please feel free to put them in the Q&A or the chat, and I'll keep an eye on that. We are recording, hopefully everybody knows that, so we just want to make sure people know. And all the participants who are not panelists are muted, but we really encourage you to use that chat and Q&A to either just share your experiences or ask your questions. So Robin, I'm going to pass it off to you.
Okay, well, hello everybody. I'm honored to be here to speak a little about my journey. I was asked to share my journey on planning my daughter's future. So first I want to give you a little context about me and our situation. I'm married, been married for 40 years, and I'm the mom of 3. I have 2 sons who are both in their 30s. And then my daughter Paige is 27 years old, and she has Angelman syndrome, has already been mentioned. And just a little bit about Angelman syndrome, because I think it helps to understand the situation we're each in. Angelman syndrome is a rare genetic disorder, and it has the characteristics are intellectual disability. My daughter's nonverbal, she has seizures. In essence, she requires a lot of support in all areas of her life. For example, she has to have total support for her activities of daily living. So she's 27. I've been dealing with school systems and daycares and healthcare systems and legal systems, Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, private insurance, etc., for 27 years. And all of you have been doing that for however long your children are alive as well. And my experience has shown me that very few interactions with these groups have been smooth. That's probably a similar experience with you. So I wanted to share a few things I've discovered in my journey so far and things I have to remind myself to remember to embrace. So I want to encourage you to remind yourself to remember to embrace these things as well. Future planning is a marathon. It is not a race. I know that's a cliche, but it is so very true that it's a marathon. All of us really have been planning for a secure future for our children since they've been born in one way or another. The second thing that I've learned is that I can't do this alone. I need others. I need other professionals. I need my family, friends, and I really need a support group such as I've been fortunate to have in the community to help point the way for me and share forward. And that's what I'm trying to do, is pay it forward as well. And that's the only way we can make this, really, is together. The third thing is, and this is a tough one for me, I will never know everything. No matter how hard I try, I'm never going to know everything. And one example is I've attended over 20 sessions that Mary Ann has given, literally. And I learn something new every single time I hear Mary Ann speak. So you can't, the old saying, you can't eat the elephant all at once. You have to have it one bite at a time. And so you got to not beat yourself up for you can't possibly know everything. And really, I just saw something today and I said, this is really nice since I'm doing this today, that, we can't know what we don't know. And then we need to forgive ourselves for that. Which the fourth thing is, I will never be done. Now, that might be hard for y'all as well. I keep on thinking, when I get this next thing done, then everything's going to be perfect for future planning. No, unfortunately, that's not the case. One, there's never going to be a perfect. And really, if you're realistic and think realistically, all of us future plan and secure plan for ourselves and our children all through our life. I'm never going to be done with myself either with future planning. So I need to remember there's no reason Paige would be different. So I need to realize I'm never going to be done. I need to give myself grace. We all need to do that. We're going to have missteps. I've had things that I wish I'd done earlier. I have things I wish I'd done a little differently, but most things are fixable. So you've got to give yourself a little grace in that. And then last, there's not one path. There's not one correct way of doing this. I think when Amanda shows the list at the end, those are suggestions. That's, maybe you want to do it in this order, but there's no one way. There's no one answer for everyone. So future planning, another issue I want to just briefly touch on is that future planning, at least for me, involves both grieving and chronic sorrow. You can't be in denial when you're trying to secure a future for your child. You have to face your own mortality, one. You have to know I'm not going to be here forever. So that's a tough thing for a lot of us to face. And the other thing you have to face is that your child is probably going to need long-term care. And that's a hard thing to have to deal with and think through. And I like denial. It's one of my favorite coping mechanisms, but you can't be in denial when you're trying to do this future planning. But what I want everybody to realize that I've been doing now for a long time with this is just because you're planning right now for future planning, it doesn't mean that things can't and won't change for your children. So your child may have improvement in areas, but all you can plan for is what you know right now. So I think it's easier to deal with the grief and the chronic sorrow you deal with when you're actually obtaining guardianship. I'll give that as an example. We didn't get guardianship on our daughter until this year. She's 27. And I wish I'd done it earlier. It really didn't negatively affect Paige in any way. But I realized finally when we did this, the emotion it was causing for me personally. And I think that was part of the reason I put it off. So I just want to bring that up because I think we forget not to be kind to ourselves. So you need to plan towards what you want the outcome to be for your child. And that's going to be different for everyone. So I want to share what our goal for Paige is. Our goal for Paige is to have her best quality of life. Paige's best quality of life is going to be different than my 37-year-old son's quality of life, but I want her to have her best quality of life. So that's our overarching goal. But the second goal, and one that keeps me awake at night, is that I want things to be so organized, or as organized as I can get them, so that when I'm no longer here, things are going to be as streamlined as possible for whomever ends up as Paige's caregiver. So my husband and I are really spending a lot of time now trying to get things fixed. So if something happened to us, her brothers who are living full lives with our own children, who love their sister dearly, we'll have things in place as best we can get them in place. So in my future planning, I've had successes and I've had regrets. We all do. But what I've got to remember is, I'm doing the best I can. So my advice finally as a mother of a 27-year-old is that you need to confront your future planning for your child one piece at a time. I know how overwhelming the present is. Everyone on this call, on Zoom, everybody has an overwhelming presence right now. I know that. But if we take it one piece at a time, it's doable. The second thing is utilize every resource you can find, including people who have already walked the walk. Start now. Or if you've already started, keep going. There's no right age to start this. I recommend you start it as early as you can because there are things you need to know from the beginning, but start whenever now is for you. And then do something, no matter how small it is, because all those smalls add up. And it's hard to see it when you're in it. But then if I look back and say, oh, well, if I do a little bit, then all those smalls end up achieving our goal. So forgive yourself for not knowing what you didn't know before you learned it. Give yourself grace. So no matter where you are in the process or how old your child is, today is the day to move forward on this. And you are starting it today because you're attending this session. So congratulations on your progress, because here you are in this. So I really recommend for this webinar that you sit back and you listen to this expert, Mary Ann. I guarantee you're going to learn at least one thing to help your journey, and so am I. So I want to pass it off to Mary Ann with that.
That was great, Robin. Thank you so much. I feel like you're our guide, like our mama guide. So I'm so glad that you're here with us.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mary Ann, we're excited to hear from you too.
So, hi, everybody. I loved what you had to say, Robin. The one thing I will tell you is when we're walking on the beach and we're looking out at the sunset, and what do we see? The horizon, right? And if we keep walking toward the horizon and we don't get any closer and we just keep walking, and we're like, I got to get there. I always tell people you need to turn around and see where you came from, right? And say, wow, look how far I walked. Because what we do, and so I'm a mom too, and a sister, and I have all kinds of family members that I'm caring for. When you're in the middle of it, the horizon seems really far away and there's so much to do. And if you take time to turn around, it gives you that, I made it, I'm getting there, right? So the other thing I'll tell you is about the word plan. Plan we create is good for today. And what we're going to do in the future is our next plan. So, but without a plan, we won't get there. So I'm gonna share my screen here, and go through a few things with you. Oops, that's not the one I wanted. Oh, I'm backwards because I went through them. So I'm gonna just quickly flip through these. Yeah, let me get it back while I. There we go. Okay. Now, can you see my slide?
We can.
Okay. So why am I doing this? My background is I was a mergers and acquisitions person in the banking industry for many, many years, and worked for some really great people who taught me some good processes, which I still carry forward. They actually taught me when I would get overwhelmed with projects to look, not looking at the horizon and turn around, which is where I got that from. But when at some point I got really tired of working in the corporate world and I decided to make a difference. And I grew up with a sister who had a disability. So Marcia's my youngest sister. There were 6 of us. She's actually a twin. Her twin did not have a disability. And Marcia is the reason I do everything I do. She had cerebral palsy. She was developmentally as an adult about age 8. And as the older she got, the less capable she became physically. But she taught me, well, first of all, when I was 6, she was 2 at the time, and my parents got the diagnosis. And my parents pulled me aside. I was 6 years old, and they pulled me aside and said, your sister has something called cerebral palsy, and she's going to need your help. And when you get older, you're going to be in charge of her because she'll always be living with you. I thought, I'm 6. This is really cool. She's always going to be with me. And I didn't know what it meant at the time, right? And so as time went on, I learned that when I would be out with her and someone would be staring at her, I would turn around and say, "What are you staring at?" And they would hustle off, and she would go, "You tell them, Mayor." So she was verbal, and she could, understand what I was doing, that I was sticking up for her. As time went on, I wanted, as a sibling, so I'm going to talk now as a sibling, I wanted her to have what I had. I took her everywhere with me. I made sure that she had friends, and if my friends didn't understand her, they weren't my friends. I mean, my life revolved around our family. And so as the older we got, the more I understood, but I really didn't understand like my parents did. When she was 21, I had parties for her, and I taught her how to drink her first glass of wine and drink too much wine, all those kind of things that we do in life that we shouldn't do. But as she got older, my parents kept her home. I didn't really know anything about what I do today until I started doing it. And I stepped up and started to ask questions. But my sister was living at home when she was 34 years old with my parents. And I was encouraging my parents to make sure, because my parents were older parents, that I needed to know everything that was going on, and we needed to prepare Marcia for some independence. She understood that not only did she want to have a life like I did, because she would say that once in a while, and she always needed a one-on-one, but she also felt that she wanted some independence. She wanted to have what I had, but she also knew that my parents needed her. So I always teach parents that our children probably have some more sense than we know about our relationship. But she went to live residentially. My parents, I will tell you, I watched my parents struggle. And so I've learned so much about the process because I watched my parents struggle with that independence and allowing her to live in a residential facility where they weren't there to protect her. I was there to challenge her. They were there to protect her. Then one night, it was actually a Saturday morning, that my father called me and told me that my sister was gone. She'd had a seizure that night. She couldn't turn over, and she suffocated in her sleep. It took me a very long time to want to get in front of families again. I was already doing it, but it took me a very long time to want to do what I do today. I just had a hard time struggling through that because she was my purpose. She was my parents' purpose. She was my purpose. My parents lost their purpose. My mother developed a depression and dementia from her death. And so we were all impacted significantly. But someone very wise, who was my mentor, said to me, all you have talked about all your life up to this point was how much she meant to you and how much you learned from her. Why don't you use that? I was already speaking and teaching, but I did learn a lot from her and I decided to use it. So out of that came what I'm doing today. She taught me what's really important in life. I was saying to someone just a little while ago, I was in a partner meeting with some business partners and they were all arguing. And I finally just stopped it and said, you guys aren't getting what's really important in life. And I realized when I said that my sister taught me that. So since that time, I have 3 boys, all have some disabilities, one significantly. They're my stepchildren. One has mental illness, so he shot himself, but he's alive and also blind. And so I was put on this planet, I think, to do what I'm doing. And my kids are doing great, in spite of all that. We've gotten my son into residential settings. And I know now as a parent how hard it is. It just is. But the other thing I know is that all the stuff we have to do, I learned this from learning that my parents were doing things given to them by other people, attorneys who did things for them that weren't right, and advice they had gotten. And all I knew is that they told me they had to keep my sister with no money. And I asked them what planning they had done, and my father didn't want to talk about it when my sister was still alive. And I kept asking, what kind of plans have you made? They didn't want to talk about it. They didn't want to talk about it. So finally he said to me, okay, you've asked every year. We'll tell you what we did. We have a will. We've disinherited your sister. You will get her share of the inheritance and she'll live with you. And that was the plan. And so I said, okay, the live with me part was okay. I didn't know that was going to be in Marcia's best interest because she was pretty bossy too. So I wasn't sure, but I didn't know why they would disinherit her. I didn't understand it at that point. I didn't know SSI and Medicaid and all the rules. And then I learned, and an attorney who, this was back in 1990, and special needs trust and some of the planning that we're doing now was just starting. Special needs trust in our state was created in 1990. So it was very new. And what I've found through those years with my parents is that it was very complex and all they were doing was the best they could do. And there was no reason that they would know what they should do because no one was teaching them, right? And it's hard enough, as Robin said, the stuff is always changing. And all we're trying to do is get through school. And then we're trying to get through the doctors and we're trying to do it. And then somebody like me comes along and says, well, you need to watch how much money your child has and you have to have these legal things done. And you have to go to court for guardianship. And you're like, I don't want to do anything. I'm not going to step forward because it's too much, which is where I came up with this, trying to make it one step at a time. Robin has it exactly right. All you could do is one thing. And so my first step is this one: be real and be candid with yourself and answer 2 questions. That's all you have to do when you start, is answer 2 questions. And first question is, what's the best thing that can happen for my child's future? And the second question is, what is your biggest fear for their future? So if you came out of today with just that, and you could identify what's the best thing that can happen and what's your biggest fear, then you could move forward, because those are, I call them your benchmarks. If you always know in your heart what you want, and if you always know what your dangers are, then we can start planning. And so if you come out of nothing but write those 2 things down for yourself and start to think about it, it's a really important step. And all the things I do is the things that Amanda's going to talk about in the checklist and the transition list. But we take it from a process of, I don't know if your first step should be number 4 or number 7 or number 3. I just put it in an order that I typically will use, but sometimes somebody needs to do a different step first. So some of the things we think about are creating a plan, just thinking about, what do I want? How do I think it's going to look? So I call that creating a map. It might be going to the attorney. I'm going to talk about this more, but getting to an attorney and getting our legal work done. Sometimes going to an attorney is so overwhelming and they ask you questions. You're like, I don't know the answer, so I'm not going back. I heard many people say when the attorney says to me, well, if you pass away, who's going to be the person who stepped into your shoes? They turn around and look and say, I'm never going back there. But the reality is, there's some really simple questions we can ask ourselves and maybe come up with some of those answers before we say the attorney, so that it's not so overwhelming. Another one might be getting benefits. So we'll talk about that a little bit, but getting all the benefits you can from the government, and they change. They change when your child is 18. They change again if your child has capacity to have any income sources, especially from parents. It changes when you retire. Your child's benefits change when you retire. At every one of those steps, we have to prove to the government our child has a disability. It didn't used to be that way, but now every time when you retire, you have to prove it again, right? Another big step we talk about is writing down things that your other people need to know, because it's in our head. And there's, when we're gone, not on this planet anymore, there's no way for us to communicate down that I know of. And so, and I assumed it's down, not up. And so how do we document that? How do we think about where are they going to live, learn, work, and play? And how are we going to pay for all that, right? So it's a process, and each step comes at a different time for you. So the first thing we think about is your child. And we think about the vision, and we think about what do we want? We think about benefits, we think about the financial stuff, and it comes from benefits. So I'm just going to leave you a couple of things to, if you haven't been versed in benefits, things to just pay attention to. Don't have money in your child's name. Okay, it's when you're applying for benefits when they're 18, they're going to look at everything. If you have a child has a bank account, that's it, but keep it below 2,000. If they have life insurance, it's going to count in their name. If they it has assets in it, cash value. If they have savings bonds in the drawer, those are going to count. All those little things that might count against your child, be aware of them, because those will be important. Keep medical records, because when your child's 18 and you're getting benefits, you're going to need those medical records. You're going to have proof either through medical professionals, social workers, and IEPs from school. And then what happens is those benefits change over time. So there's limitations of what income your child has, and there's limitations of what assets your child have to get these benefits, but they're important. They're really important. One thing to know about health insurance when we're looking at all the benefits is Medicaid and Medicare are programs that pay for health coverage. If your child is on your group health insurance, because people are sometimes surprised at this, they hear that the Affordable Care Act says that your child can stay on your health insurance until they're 26. But most states have a statute that says your child can stay on your group health insurance as long as you have it. But it's important to know where the company you work for is domiciled, and it's important to read about your health insurance plan to see if that fits. So I'm not going to go through a lot of it, but I want to give you a few key things that I hear people say, wow, I didn't know that. It's important to know. So benefits are going to be a really important of planning when your child turns 18. And then again, when you retire, your choices of your own retirement impact a benefit your child can get called DAC, Disabled Adult Child. So on your Social Security record, there's money your child will get that's greater, and then they become eligible for Medicare, which is a really good health plan. Right, today, anyway, under the rules today. All right. Another thing we like to see people do is write it all down. Write all this stuff down that you're talking about, because when we're not on this planet again, there's not going to be that information. And so if you think the siblings know everything, they don't. I'll be the first one to tell you they don't. When my sister passed away, when my sister was alive, I'd always ask my mother to write things down. She didn't. When my sister passed away, I again asked my mother to write down things about my sister. I thought I was being her therapist, but in reality, I wanted to know more about my sister. She was gone. My mother never did it, I didn't think. And then one day I was cleaning out my mother's materials because she was moving into my home because I became her caregiver. And I was moving her things into my home. And in this one dresser, it was full of letters. There was over 1,000 letters to me written by my mom about my sister. And I read them, and some of them were funny, some of them were sad, but they were all she chronicled my sister's life. So I will tell you, I didn't know half the stuff she wrote, and I was very attached to my sister. So as much as you think other people know, they don't. This is a really important thing to do, is just write a journal, create a journal about your child. Who are their friends? What are their medicines? Who are the doctors that you want to keep involved in? Who are the doctors you should never see again? All those kind of little things that are important, but also who are the relatives that play an important role? What are the school system? What should they know? All of that. And that the other person that's really important in this planning is you. Because if you're not okay, they're not okay. And I will tell you as a parent, I always put my children first. We all do that. But we have to understand that if I say in my will, I'm leaving everything for my child in the future, but if I don't plan right, 100% of everything I have might be nothing, right? I might need it for my own care. So doing your own planning is important. But then when you do your planning, the legal part is very important. So there's something called a special needs trust. The average person, if you talk to, and the average attorney will have no idea what you're talking about, or they might. So there's three kinds of attorneys. There's attorneys who do this really well. There's attorneys who know nothing. And then there's attorneys in the middle who try the best they can. And as Robin said, you don't know what you don't know, right? So when I looked at my parents' things, they had disinherited my sister, and they had said in their documents they were leaving something to me to take care of her. What's wrong with that? Well, I loved her. So if I got a pot of money that I was supposed to take care of her, I loved her. However, if I got sued, that money was at risk. Or if I wanted to go to Hawaii, I could. If I wasn't, being a legitimate good sister, I could borrow it and never put it back. Or if I got married and put it in joint tenancy, thinking my husband was going to be a really good guy and he would take care of my sister if something happened to me, what if I got divorced? And if I put it in joint tenancy, it could be his, right? So doing that isn't the right answer. And finding an attorney who knows how to do this trust. So a special needs trust on the left is a trust that we call a special needs trust, sometimes called a third-party trust, meaning it's going to be funded by people, not the child, but by us, other third-party people. And we put in there our inheritance. So my will says, when I pass away, I'm leaving money into this trust. It's never considered our child's money because we can't leave them an inheritance, right? They can only have $2,000, but they need it. So here's a child who needs money for our future, but yet we can't leave them money. This is how we do it. We're allowed to leave as much as we feel is appropriate for their future care. Now, the government may pay for a lot of things, but they're not going to pay for a lot of the things that they need over and above what the government pays for, and that's what this trust does. So we can leave an inheritance that we set up the rules. We say who it's for. We say, I'm going to take care of it until I pass away. I'm going to name the other people who are going to take care of it when I'm gone. And it's for my son as long as he's alive. And then when he passes away, I'm going to say who gets it. So I'm in control of how I set those rules up, but it needs to be drafted by the attorney in a very specific way. The other trust on your right side, the one that says supplemental payback trust, that's a trust for oops, somebody goofed up. So let's say I do everything right and I leave my inheritance to the trust on the left, but grandma didn't listen and grandma leaves my son some money. So now he's got money and it's more than $2,000. Let's say she leaves him $100,000, knowing that, well, Mark probably needs something, so she leaves it to Mark. Mark will lose his benefits with that $100,000. So I'm allowed to take his money, put it into this other kind of trust that the attorney would draft up. And it is spent for my son, for his supplemental care. But the difference of these two trusts is the one on the right. If he were to, when he passes away, the government can get reimbursed for Medicaid spent. So that's not my choice of trust, but it is my choice that if he were going to lose his benefits, I get that trust. So it's not something you have to remember, except that if your child inherits money by mistake, just remember, oops, I need to do something about it and see an attorney. But again, only attorneys who have extreme, they have a reason. Why do most attorneys who do this? They usually have a child with a disability. That's the case I find mostly. And the other legal thing that we need to think about is that guardianship, right? So when our child turns 18, we're still their mom, we're still their dad, but we are not their guardian. We are not the legal person responsible for them. So we go to court and we prove our child needs someone to make those decisions for them. And that's what guardianship is all about. And you can do that yourself. You can hire an attorney to do it. There's lots of ways to do that. Okay, so legal things. Those are hard decisions. The other thing the attorney is going to ask us when we do a will is, if I'm the guardian for my son, when I pass away, I will nominate who should be the guardian after me. Right? I'm not appointing, I am nominating. So if I appoint my sister, if something were to happen to me, to become the guardian for my son, she will still have to go to court, but the court will respect what I want. But those are the things that are really hard decisions. We are making decisions about the special needs trust, of who's going to take care of the money. We are making decisions in our will of appointment, of nominating someone to be the guardian, and they're the person who's going to be the care person. They don't have to necessarily be the person that the child lives with, but they are the person that makes all those decisions. Those are hard decisions. The other thing I wanted to bring up is the ABLE Act. So that's a new thing come about the last couple of years. It is a way to save money for your child that will not count against him. So now our child can have not just the special needs trust and not just the $2,000, but they could also have an account. And it's similar to the college savings account that we set up for children who are going to college. It's actually part of the same legislation. But we're allowed to create one of these savings accounts. They are set up by state. So you can't go to a bank and open it up, and you can't go to a broker and open it up. You actually go, each state has one, but you can go online and find the ABLE account for your state, if your state has one, and open an account, and you're allowed to put $15,000 a year away for the child into this account. The good thing about it is it's a way to save for the future. Still the negative thing about these accounts is, one, if you have more than $100,000 saved in this account, it will stop and suspend the SSI check that your child's getting. So while your child's getting SSI, we're really careful about how we use this account until after they're out of the SSI system and maybe into the DAC program when you were older. The other downside about the ABLE account at this point is, when your child passes away, the government can get reimbursed for Medicaid spent. So using these tools is really important as to understanding how one works. But I think every parent who has a child with a disability should open an ABLE account, just for the purpose of, while my child is only allowed to have $2,000 and someone gave us some money for them, well, they could gift into this account. Okay. Or your child's has $1,800 in the account, and all of a sudden they get a stimulus check. Right. And so that stimulus check can be moved over to the ABLE account. So it's a great tool. And I think everybody should at least open one up with a small amount so that it's there, just in case you don't want to lose your benefit. Okay. And we have lots of webinars on ABLE accounts that teach you how to use them and how to open them. All right. So what people say to me a lot is, oh my gosh, you just went through a lot of stuff. It's so confusing. And Robin's laughing, right? The questions I get is, well, how do I know how to do this? How do I know how much my child needs? Well, it's not unlike, how much do I need for retirement? It's going through this process, and it's work. I will tell you it's work. How much should I put in my budget? So when we retire, if I was married and my husband and I were retiring, do we just have to plan for 2? Nope. We got to plan for 3, because all of our lifetime, we have to make sure that we're providing, and we're used to doing it. We just have to continue to do it through our retirement. And then how much should I leave into the trust? Those are all components. And we have lots of tools where you can help think about that. These are all steps, but just take the first one. Okay. How much should be in the ABLE account? How much should be in the special needs trust? Don't get confused by that. Should I use insurance? How should I fund it? Lots of questions that come up as you're going through the process. But again, where do you start? Question number 1, what's the best thing that could happen? And what is my biggest fear? Now, do you ever think you can get to the point where you say, I'm done? No. Robin's shaking her head. No, of course we don't. Because I'm never done with my own retirement planning. People who thought they were retiring in the beginning of 2020, or they thought they were going to work, the people who thought they're going to retire in 2020 didn't. Why? Because we had a pandemic. So they said, well, I might as well work another year, right? Things change. So we don't know what the future holds. As I said, a plan is only what we have right now, and we figure out what the budget should look like for us, for our child. So what is the best thing that can happen? It's different for everybody. I had a client who'd been doing this process for 20 years. And I like to tell this story because I like to tell stories that are success stories, that it's possible. You take one step at a time, one step at a time. And pretty soon, one day, do you ever have that where one day you're like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. And that's what this family called me up and said, we got to come and see you. And they had a realization that they had 3 children, and one was a doctor, and it's a woman. She was a very successful doctor, and their son was an attorney and worked for a big law firm and was very successful. And then they had a child with some special needs, and they were able to. Their goal was to have their best thing that could happen was that their child was happy, really happy, living in a group home that they felt would make that person happy, to have a one-on-one, to be involved in some activities that she really liked. That was their goal, to have her have a safe, happy life. And that's how they defined it. So they came into my office because they realized they had gotten their daughter placed. She really liked the people that she lived with. She had the medical team that she needed in place. She was in recreational activities that she enjoyed. And she went to a program that she volunteered at, did some things. And they realized of their 3 children, their child with special needs was their most successful child. And, the other 2 had all the capabilities in the world to be successful, and they were in anybody else's view, but their daughter was the most successful one. So that was fun. So how do you do that? How do you get to that point? Of all those steps is Robin talked about the necessity to not do it alone. And we can't. We have to have people around us. I call it building our dream team. So in the middle is the child, and the dream team is your family, but it has to be much bigger than that. Sometimes you need a coach who's going to take you along. You're going to have to find trustees and guardians, but we don't have to create this team of guardians and trustees and leave the job to them. So you start to identify all the team players that you can put in place to support the guardians and trustees. It's much easier to give somebody a job if you say, here's the job, and here's all the people that are going to help you. So, here's all the medical people, here's the therapists, and here's the doctors, all the doctors that are going to be there for you. And I've talked to them and they agree to be on the team. And here's the friendships and the social interactions of people that will take on that part of the role and make sure the cousins who will make sure that they visit and do the things they need to do, and all the support groups. If they're living in a group home, how is all the maintenance of the group home done? Who are the attorneys that we have to have in place and on our team? All of those people are part of our team. And so when you sit down and start to leave these responsibilities legally to people, there's many more people that we can put on the team. And that's where you get that, when you can turn back from the horizon and turn around and say, wow, I've created a whole company around my child. I've created a team, and that's their team. So that's the biggest advice I will have is every time you meet somebody who can help you, get their card, get their name, ask them if they'll help, and keep building your team. So I think I covered a lot of things, and I hope I didn't overwhelm you, but all I want you to do is one thing: figure out what's the best thing that could happen and what's your biggest fear, because if you start there, you'll get there. Thank you.
Fantastic. You did cover a lot of ground in not a lot of time, Marianne. So, we definitely planned this session thinking this is a broad stroke, right? And now Amanda's going to take us through a list that she and Robin and quite a large team, actually, I think, have been pulling together to help all of us, not just the Angelman team, to really push through this, guide us on our journey. So I'm going to hand it over to you.
Absolutely. And thank you so much to both Robin and Mary, who I consider to be a part of my dream team for sure. And I will say that I have a child, my son Jackson, who has Angelman syndrome, is 5. So being prepared looks so much different in my eyes right now. And these talks can be incredibly overwhelming for me. You know, we were just diagnosed a few years ago, and thinking about all of these things, as well as still processing the diagnosis, can still sometimes be incredibly challenging. And there's feeling of like this weight kind of on your chest of like, like you don't want to go there because you're still in that state of, you know, thinking about processing through the diagnosis and what your life may be and what your child's life may be moving on. But the one thing I've learned is that, and I think it's been said so many times here, is it is never too late to take simple steps to be prepared. And I think it will help. It has helped with me of that feeling of overwhelmingness and like the anxiety that starts creeping up into my chest when I think about any sort of future for my child. And so the one thing that we really wanted to do at the foundation is how do we simplify this a little bit, or at least put it in a place that's very easy for our families when they do become overwhelmed with the process and the thinking of all those things that, you know, all those different steps that you have to go to. How can we take a little bit of that burden off of them and put it in a place that's digestible for them and provide them with resources? And so we created a couple of resources, and I'm going to try to, these will be available to you all. So we'll make sure to get that link out to everybody. And I'm not going to walk through every single step because I want to leave some time for some Q&A. But there's two different documents that we looked at. We first looked at, when it comes to being prepared, what are the kind of key milestones in the life of a caregiver or an individual with a special need? What are those key moments? And for us, there were two that really stood out for us. One was when you're first diagnosed, right? When you're first diagnosed with whatever that special need or that rare disease is, in the case of Angelman syndrome, you know, your world comes crashing down and you have literally no clue what next steps are going to be. And so, you know, one thing we did was create, as you can see on the left here, and I'm hoping you can see my screen. Can you guys see this? Okay, great. We created this idea of the first 100-day journey. So this is a toolkit that I think is applicable to really anyone, not just specific. It was created for Angelman syndrome, but I think the steps in both of these resources are steps for any child with a special need. I think would be very helpful. But these are basically steps on helping families navigate through those first 100 days, thinking about, you know, what appointments do you need to set up when you're thinking about therapies, when you're thinking about, you know, applying for Medicaid, you need to connect with your schools, like all these things that you probably wouldn't think about because you're kind of thrown into this situation that you maybe have never planned on being thrown into. We made a checklist for people to work through that and navigate their life after a diagnosis. So that's the first thing. But the one thing I wanted to focus on was the other kind of really pivotal moment in the life that we really thought about, was this idea of when there is transitioning happening to, you know, for individuals to think about those next steps and being prepared. So we created this transitioning to adulthood checklist. And this was actually created with one with the Angelman syndrome adult services task force. But we also brought a lot of other rare disease groups into the space because we wanted to get a full picture of what this looked like. We also know that this will be an ever-changing document and a growing document. So this isn't probably all inclusive, but it's a good step. And it's basically looking at the different stages, you know, the different ages in your life of your child and things that you should be thinking about during those times. And so you'll have things like, you know, in this checklist, you'll have like the thing that you want to think about and resources connected to it. Because the last thing we want to do is say you need to set up an able account trust. And then you have to spend a lot of time digging to find out that information, right? We are trying to make it as easy as possible with this checklist to help people through that. And then the other part of both checklists that I think both Mary and Robin pointed out, for the 100-day checklist, you know, the one simple thing we say on the back here, and if you can see, is this whole idea of organizing a binder for you. So starting early on of collecting that really important information of your child, because it can be very overwhelming to do that when you're, 15, 16, 17 years into it. But thinking early on, how do I go ahead and collect this journal of things for my family? So one, I can be prepared for when someone asks me for a copy of the diagnosis, or someone asks me for a copy of the last EEG, or whatever it may be. Or if, you're out of town and something happens with your child and you need to get access to your neurologist, it's all there. So this information, right here about organizing your binder is just some ideas of things that we would really encourage you to start thinking about. And the other thing that we did also is, I think the really important thing in this journey is that thinking that you are not alone. We thought it was really, really important that we worked with families within our community that have already walked this walk, and really lifting them up as leaders and champions in the community to help other families go through this. So this idea of creating experts within your community, and I'm not sure 100% the audience that's on the phone today, if there are any people who are supporting or any sort a rare disease population or special needs population, the best thing I think that we have done is really create champions within our community who've walked this walk for us. And the one reason why this became very important to the Angelman Syndrome Foundation was when I came onto this role a few years ago, we did a survey with our community. And what came out of that survey was just like a brick that fell and hit us in the head of how much we have forgotten, or we haven't provided resources for our families to prepare them for this next step, for transitioning into it, or whatever that may be. And so we have become very passionate at the foundation of, we want to make sure that we're supporting our families on every inch of this journey. And part of that is helping them understand what the things that they need to think about as they're moving on. So as a young parent, I don't know a lot of this stuff. I'm learning a lot, and I can tell you it's very overwhelming. For a lot of my young parents that are on the phone right now, one, I applaud you for being on, because I think that's the first step, is to start learning now. And I agree with Robin 100%. It's taking baby steps, but there are resources out there that can help you. And these are just a few of them. We've done a deep dive of all the resources that are out there to help families with being prepared. And obviously, Marianne is one of the largest resources for us. We have a lot of webinars on our website that Marianne has done. Her website is a wealth of knowledge. There's a lot of stuff out there, and it can be very crippling to drown in all of it, right? To even know where to start. So that's why, these checklists were created, and we would be honored if these are used in any way to help you and support you through that journey. And, my best piece of advice, especially for, I would say, the young parents on the call, is we don't know what the future has for our children. I know, and I'll just be very transparent from my perspective of Angelman syndrome. I am confident that there's going to be treatments that are going to better the life of my child, but I still need to prepare that life for my child, no matter what that may look like. And so it's really, really important to be thinking about these things as we move forward. And even though it seems sometimes you can get lost in the despair of that planning, I think the confidence it gives you and the assurance it gives you really just will help you in that anxiety of what that life for your child is going to be. And no matter what it ends up being, you're prepared, right? You're prepared and you're ready for it. So those are just a few things that we've done at the foundation. I know that there's probably some questions, so I wanted to make sure. I know we only have a few minutes left, so I'll stop talking, but I know the group is more than happy to answer any questions that have come through.
Thanks, Amanda. All right, if you stop sharing, I'm going to adjust back to the group here. Terrific. So there was a question directed at you, Marianne, I'm assuming. Will money in multiple 529 accounts be combined for accounting purposes?
Okay, so 529 don't belong to the child. So if you're asking about, will it be counted for counting purposes, meaning for SSI and having an asset, a 529 will not count. If that helps. Okay. Is that, I'm not sure if I answered the question right, because the accounting purposes question, I wasn't sure what the question was. So if there, some person who asked that might.
And you can only have one. They may be asking about that as well.
Well, able. So 529s and able are two different things. So if somebody has set up 529 for your children, sometimes I get that question, well, my child's got a 529, is that going to count against them? No, it won't. An able account, the child can only have one able. And so if grandma sets one up, that's it. Or if you set one up, that's it. The most that can go in it is in a year is 15,000. Okay, so once it's funded to that level, no one else could put more money in it, and you can't have two. So, okay.
Right. And Shoshana, if you're there and you want to chime in and clarify, feel free. I think I gave you the ability to.
You answered my question. Thank you. So my father-in-law has a 529 set up for my son. So I wanted to know, like, if I set one up, how will that adversely affect his ability to get SSI later or something?
Yeah. So the 529s will not. And if you find that because the 529 is for college. So if you find that college won't be doing something you're doing, you can take the 529 and transfer it to an able at the level of 15,000 a year. And then able is not for college. Able is for school. It's for anything. And basically, if I ask the people who created the able accounts and manage them, it's supposed to be for special needs purposes. And when they answer that question, I say, what does that mean? Basically, the answer is, if you're using something to make the child's life better, you can use it. That's the answer.
Is that a 529A?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
It's
So only
529A.
one 529A per child.
Yes. Yes. And they're
Thank
very different than 529s because they're not set up at a brokerage house, which 529s can be set up by an investment person. 529A able can only be set up at the state. So you can go online and they're all opened up online.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And you answered this question. I don't know if you want to add any shading around the edges here, but Betsy was asking whether she should move her daughter's 529 to an able. Is that a better place for the funds to be?
My answer would be probably because 529 can only be used for college, and the 529A can be used for anything, including college. So I would tend to use the 529A until I thought my child was not going to have a disability into the future. Okay. Okay.
Great. And Michelle was asking, what is your suggestion for what to tell grandparents, relatives, etc., who want to give your child small amounts of money for birthdays, holidays? Is the able account the place to go?
So if they want to give them money and it's not I would put it in the able, unless it was just going to be a small amount that they're going to go and buy themselves something small. But if it's specifically for saving, I definitely would use the able account. And that's what it was created for mostly, is for gifting and for, keeping money down for benefits. But the other reason it was created was for people who, grandparents are gifting to grandchildren and they want to give to all the grandchildren. This way they can still give to the grandchild.
Right. And then those funds can be used for whatever the caregivers think it needs to be used for. And then as a caregiver, once you pass, those funds are still available for your child, either to pull from if they're able to, or their next.
Right. And one of the things
guardian.
we actually look at, because the able account is really useful day to day, and it holds usually smaller pots of money, and the special needs trust holds the big pots of money. So if you wanted money that's usable on a regular basis, I would make sure my special needs trust had language in it that allows the trustees to put money in the able for the child, even when we're gone. It's a very useful tool.
Yeah, that's great. And are they the same state by state? Able, that's a federal?
It's a federal law administered by the state. So you can either use the one it's in your state, or you can use another state. Some states do not have them. I know, like Wisconsin does not have an able, but Illinois allows anybody to use it. And some states, Florida says only Florida residents. So there's a ablenrc.org, and that compares all the ABLE accounts. So
Mm.
you can go and look at yours and say, well, maybe the one in my state is more costly. Maybe I want to use another state's.
Mhm.
Okay.
Terrific.
Yeah, it's a great tool.
Yeah. And thanks, Amanda, for sharing the checklist there. We will also make sure that that goes out as a follow-up to this email, and that we post it on DEE-P with this webinar, as well as all the resources that Marianne has on her website, which are
The
significant.
checklist was fabulous.
Yeah,
really great.
it's really, I
Very-
can't.
Oh, Robin.
Yeah.
I can't wait to dig into it.
Yeah.
I know. I'm also guilty. You know, my son is 8, but I still haven't really done a lot of the planning. So yeah, it is overwhelming, but I appreciate the sentiment of just little by little, you know, and I have all that paperwork sitting there and it's like, but if I just do one page at a time, we can get there.
Yeah.
And we have whether Marianne and Amanda, could you talk a little bit about the idea of planning for best outcomes? And, you know, Amanda, like you said, not assuming that, you know, things will stay status quo or become better or deteriorate, but just planning for their best outcome, which I think is a great advice. Yeah.
Yeah, so I would also say, I think that Marian brought this up as well, as, you know, I think that we definitely want to plan for the best outcome. I also could see my plan for Jackson, who is 5 now, changing 4 years from now. So I think we also have to be fluid in what that plan looks like, right? Because I do think there will be things that will benefit Jackson and his quality of life that may change the plan that I have in my mind for him now.
Right.
So I think it's really, really hard to say, like, I'm planning now for what Jackson's going to do at 18. You know, right now I'm planning for what Jackson's going to do after I get off this call, because I know I can hear him out there and I know he's ready for mama. So, you know, it's also knowing that, yes, you want to plan for the best case scenario, but you also want to for also, like, what is everything that you think based on the child you have in front of you now that you may need, but be prepared and be flexible that may change.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we look at plans, we say, what could happen? It's like a map, and you have this map and you're going to go a certain way, but you get to that point and the road's closed. So you're going to have to go a different way. So you want to have a map that has all these different options on it so that nothing is cast in concrete. Everything can go either way. And you always kind of have, well, if this happens, I'm going to go here. But that here might be someplace totally different than you thought you were going to go to. It's very important to build flexibility in your legal documents and your financial documents, everything, and in your brain.
Yeah. So it's planning for all eventualities.
Yeah.
And that way you're ready.
And you don't know what they are. None of us knows, right? None of us really knows. So.
Right.
Yeah.
We had a question about what second to die insurance is.
So a lot of times when we calculate what a person needs and to fund that special needs trust, it's a bigger number than we could probably have. And so insurance is one of the vehicles we often use because it's a way to create money. And if I have a life insurance policy on my life, it's going to cost X amount. And so I know, let's say I decide I want to fund that trust with $500,000. To buy an insurance policy for $500,000 on my life is going to cost X. Insurance companies look at it, and how they price it is what has to happen for us to have to pay this money out. In the case of special needs, we agree if there's a couple that we're both going to make sure that that occurs, that the trust is funded. But we don't have to have it funded until we're both gone. And so you buy one policy insuring 2 lives. So the cost of that same amount of insurance will be about half or to 2/3 as much. It depends upon your health. Okay. Even if I have a couple and one is not healthy and one is healthy, a second to die will be cheaper than a policy on the healthy one, because it doesn't have to pay out until the second death. But you design it in a way, especially if you're still working, you would want to design that kind of policy to say, I'm going to pay for it now because when I'm retired, I don't want to pay for it anymore. So there's lots of design that goes into it, but that's what a second to die is. It's a way to buy much more insurance for a special needs trust because you're funding 2 people.
Fantastic. I had no idea.
So very typical tool that we'll use in funding the trust.
That's great to know. All right, we'll take this one last question. Are transition for future benefits more automatic if a child is already qualifying for the Medicaid waiver?
If they have the Medicaid waiver and they're under 18, when they turn 18, you'll have to reapply.
Mhm.
And so there's many times you have to reprove A, that you have no money, and B, that the child still has a disability. And it's just keep good records. That binder is a great idea, and having access to that information, because we just did one for somebody that the mom applied for benefits and got the child Medicare, but then dad retired. And when dad retired 3 years later, we had to prove medical records all over again on the children so that we could get their benefits opened up again. So just because you're approved once does not mean you're always approved.
Right, right. And I see another question popped up. Do we need to see a special needs financial planner? Is there such a person? That's a great question, Denise. So who are the people we need to visit? There's lawyers, there's financial planners.
Right. It's a team. And so you definitely need an attorney. It would be good to have special needs planner if you could find one. I will tell you, as financial professionals, it is not taught. People who do this usually have a family member when they learn it through the School of Hard Knocks. We teach advisors now, but it's not taught. So if you're a certified financial planner, there's one paragraph in the 2-year program that says, oh yeah, there's a special needs trust. Financial planners don't know it. So we speak often to financial planners to teach them. And the ones who want to know it, there's a reason. They either have a brother, a sister, a child. And so it's a good add-on because the attorney does the legal work. It's good to be working with somebody who can interpret the legal talk for you, because a financial person usually will know that as well. But it's making sure if you're working with a financial person, they have that knowledge and they don't give you advice that you're done doing something that you should do. And the same thing with attorneys. You need to find people who I'd ask the questions. We have on our website, we have questions you can ask and I can share them. But questions you should ask of the attorney and questions you should ask of a financial person working with you.
And is there a place to find these people? I mean, obviously we know people can reach out to you, but you're one person. And
yeah. Well, on our website, we have a website where you can check by state, the attorneys. But there's also groups called Special Needs Alliance. And if attorneys belong to Special Needs Alliance, you know they know what their stuff is. There's a group called Special Needs Planners. A lot of the special needs planners don't do special needs work, but also do elder care work. So you have to pay attention to what they say their specialty is. But those are the two most places where people belong.
Excellent. That's great. We'll make sure we get those up on the website as well on DEE.
Okay. Good.
All right. Any final thoughts, Robin, Amanda, Marianne? This has been really incredible.
Deep breaths. Deep breaths through the journey. Yep.
Yeah, terrific. Thanks, Marissa. Always great to see you. Yeah, sorry, we just got a comment from Marissa that she really enjoyed this. I have to say that this is something that's been on my, shoulders for a long time, thinking about and, knowing, it's on the to-do list and it's one of those shoulds. But after hearing from you all, I really have this much renewed sense that it doesn't have to be so overwhelming. It's little pieces at a time. And I know, Robin, some things you didn't do, until Paige was 20, and some you chose not to do until later for very, smart reasons. And so, thinking about that map, I think makes a lot of sense, Mary Ann. What are we going to do when? And we can use this checklist that Amanda and Robin and their team have been working on to help guide us through and pick what we feel is most important and start there. So, and you've already started because you're here today, just like Amanda said.
So today, I always say it's like, when you start the little thing, it feels like a marble in your pocket. It's just small. If you wait until your child's 40, it feels like a bowling ball you got to lift, right? So just lift one little thing. It's amazing how much good feelings you get by doing one little thing. I think, right?
Yeah. All right. Well, Jada comments, this is our dream team for sure. This is really fabulous. We're so grateful to all of you for sharing your stories and for everybody joining us to hear about kind of how you can begin on this journey. What is indeed a journey, right? It is not not a race, a marathon, right? So terrific. We'll get this webinar up on the website soon with a bunch of links to Marianne's resources and Angelman Syndrome Foundation. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good
Thank
night,
you.
everyone.
Take
Thank
care,
you.
everyone. Bye.
Night. Bye-bye.